Good morning, everyone. It's Mesha with As Long as You're Breathing. And oh my gosh, I'm giddy, giddy, giddy. Y'all know it because look who's in the house with me. Hello, Elizabeth.
Hi, Misha. Great to be here. It's good to be with you.
Oh, it's always good to have you. It's always good to have you. And of course, I jokingly call you co-founder of the network, but you are. So I don't know why I say jokingly, but let's get housekeeping out of the way. I told you all earlier in the little video I did about an hour ago that, of course, if you're watching on Facebook, which that's where you are, is we are on StreamYard. So you have to enable StreamYard in your settings so that I know that you're here. And we get your messages in the chat and we can answer your questions because we really want to do that. If you're watching the recording, go ahead and put your questions there because we do watch the comments and we will get back to you, or message us. We will answer you that way as well. And with that out of the way, we're just going to move right along and we're going to move into the topic because I have no idea where Elizabeth is going with this one. She has pulled a rabbit out of the hat on me with this one, but of course I know she's going to link it back to the relevant subjects as always, but whatever she wants to talk about is relevant, which I've told her already. Today's topic is the challenges and gifts of betrayal. Looking for love in all the wrong places. And we already have somebody here wanting to know what this is about. Good morning. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. And Elizabeth, what in the world are we talking about today? Looking for love in all the, that's a country song. I know that. That's a country song. It was a hit.
So, yeah, I love this topic. So, you probably don't know this. It's not like a super public. It's just something I do. Um, I'm a coach for so I'm an addiction recovery coach, and that's kind of well known.
Right.
But I'm also a PBT coach. So
PBT. That's not like peanut butter and jelly. That's PBT. So what is PBT? And hello, glad you're here with us. Put your name over in the comments so we know who you are. But go ahead, Elizabeth.
Post betrayal transformation.
Post betrayal transformation. Well,
Coach.
that
Yeah.
is really interesting because whenever I was not well and we logged on and you spent like hours on with me one night helping me, one of the things that was in my back, you said that's betrayal.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was in the right hands for sure. But go ahead.
So Dr. Debbie Silber has done a study. She did her PhD on this, and she continues to postdoctoral to do more work. She's kind of like the Brene Brown is vulnerability, Dr. Debbie Silver's betrayal. And so she has this whole platform where people can go. She's got 12 to 15 coaches. I can't remember quite how many. There's a bunch of us. And we offer classes every week. Once a week, we offer a class on helping to heal from the betrayal experience. It's a whole platform where you can go to get support from each other, one another, and you can connect in with Debbie as well, and then the coaches. So we've all been taught and groomed by Debbie. And so it's this really cool platform. It's private, so you have to pay, but it's certainly well worth it because the betrayal experience is heavy, and it can really present as a burden if we're not able to move beyond it into the transformation part. So Debbie wrote this book. It was just published. It was just.
Yeah, I know. We're brilliant and we can write books, but we can't navigate this screen. It's all of us.
Backwards. So she wrote this book, From Hardened to Healed, The Effortless Path to Release Resistance, Get Unstuck, and Create a Life You Love. Wow. And there are some stories in here from 3 of the coaches, the PBT coaches, and a few of the practitioners, and my stories in here.
Good.
And anyway, amazing book. Already a bestseller, which is pretty cool. It was just published like 10 days ago or something.
Great.
So it's already doing really well. And I just felt that it would be helpful to talk about now my story a little bit around betrayal. It's not an easy story to tell,
sure.
But in my work in addiction recovery, I'm coming up, and this is Mental Illness Day was just the other day. Chronic Pain Month was last month. Addiction Recovery Month was last month. So in my studies or my reading on all these things, mental health is a big piece. And
Yes.
underneath that is domestic violence. And
Yes.
we don't talk about that stuff. You know, we don't, I don't feel like we talk about it enough. And with COVID, all this stuff has gotten worse. Like the overdose rates are higher, and it's just people are feeling the pressure. So I just felt it was important to come in and talk about my own personal story.
I suppose less chance to get out of the home, less chance to escape, less chance to have time away, and so it's like a pressure cooker type thing. Is that what?
Yeah, well, there's that, and we can't do the things that we normally do, and we're confined, and people are losing their jobs, and um, there's you can't get stuff. There's a lot of things that we kind of took for granted that we're not doing anymore. There are ways that
Yeah.
we connect and find balance in our life, and we do them in groups because we're social creatures.
Right.
So whatever the cause, there's many things that are just bubbling up because of this pandemic, because of the circumstances. Um, what happened to me didn't happen during a pandemic, but
Right.
it's just kind of like a look into what can happen. So
Right.
I was born in a home where I had all the material goods. You know, I had food and beautiful house, and um, my dad was pretty cool. My mom was very troubled, and she was bipolar, and they didn't know what bipolar was until I was what 25 or something. They didn't even know what it was. And in my world, in my culture that I grew up in, mental health was like you go to the loony bin was what they called it, and it was this
Right.
bad. And I was scared to death of that. Was like, oh, I better not go crazy because I, I'll end up there. And that was like the
Yeah.
horrible place, right?
Yes.
Not understanding. And no one in the culture understood really. When none of
Right.
them were psychologists or therapists or anything. Anyway, it's the way I grew up. And my mom
Yes.
had bipolar disorder, like I said, and she also had chronic pain. Interestingly enough, back
Yeah. Imagine
pain,
that. Yeah.
back pain, which I had for a long time.
Right.
Interestingly enough, I always thought the reason that I had back pain was different, but it turned out it kind of wasn't.
Right.
Um, so she had a lot of emotional stuff that she carried, and she was in physical pain, but she was also in mental anguish. Bipolar is a very scary place to live, and
Yes.
so she drank alcohol, and so she had a lot of rage in her, and um, so anyway, I had this thing that I wanted my mother's love. I just it was a frequency. I always went after it. I still feel it rise up in me these today. I'm learning a lot more. For the viewers today, there's a really cool book out there called Mother Hunger, and I can't remember who the author is. Mother Hunger, amazing book. Really explains the anybody, especially women, but also men. Um, it really explains the connection between mothers and their children, and when things aren't optimal, what happens. And most of
Okay.
us, things were not optimal, right?
Yeah.
Even in the,
Right.
I mean, I tried to be the best mother I could, but my son, still feels the hurt
Yeah.
from me being on medication all that time because I couldn't be 100% present with him. There was
That's
a lot of focus
same.
on, yeah, there's a lot of focus on
Same.
me. Yeah,
Same. I tried very hard and did accomplish breaking the cycle of abuse, physical
me
abuse,
too. Yeah,
and those things. But that doesn't mean that my son still doesn't have things that we've had to work through and are still
mm,
working through. And so yeah, so absolutely,
yeah. So it's super, super important to kind of um, understand that I don't think anybody gets through life without experienced trauma of some
absolutely,
point. Um,
absolutely.
but the frequency for me was like I wanted my mother's love, and I never seemed to quite get it. I'd feel like she was right there with me, and then boom, she would just turn on a dime. And
Yeah.
this is alcoholism. This is just how it showed, and bipolar. This is how it showed up for her. So I had this. I just figured I always had this hope that if I could just figure out the right way to be, that she wouldn't do any of that, and I never could, right? Um, so so there's in betrayal, there's a number of stages. There's the setup, there's the breakdown, and I'll go through those. There's the stage 3 where survival instincts emerge, and a lot of people get stuck in stage 3, and I was stuck in there for a long time.
Sure.
And then the 4th stage is the adjustment, being able to shift out of just survival and into thrival. And the 5th stage is really healing, rebirth, and a new worldview. So my story is kind of couched in those stages and how I went through them.
Okay.
And the setup is my mom. When I was 13, my parents divorced, and when I was 14, I went to live with her. And one day we were in the kitchen in the evening, in the kitchen cooking. I think I was 15, and she had been sick, and she'd been taking antibiotics, and I didn't understand how dangerous antibiotics and alcohol was at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I just, I'm 15,
yeah.
I know.
Right.
I mean, I knew alcohol was dangerous, and I knew drugs were kind of, we had to be careful with drugs, but I didn't know much more.
Mm-hmm.
She mixed alcohol and antibiotics, which is like a total no-no. And she just went psychotic. And she turned and she put a knife up to my neck. She just rushed me and put this knife up into my neck. And this is profound what happened here. I remember like this and thinking, I'm going to die, and thinking, I must be a horrible person if my own mother wants to take me out, kind of thing. And then this is what happened. I felt this energy come down right through the top of my head and out my hands, and it literally pushed her back. And she turned around and walked away. She dropped the knife and kind of collapsed in a corner.
Wow.
I mean, if that's not higher power in action, I don't know what is. Right?
I'm convinced. I don't know
how to do that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, needless to say, I was pretty shocked, and I called my dad, and I think my dad was pretty shocked too. He was 50 miles away in his house, and he said, I thought he'd just come right up and get me,
Yeah, right.
And he said, stay there for the night, and because it was early evening, stay there for the night and pack a bag in the morning and pretend like you're just coming home for the weekend. So like not even admitting what just happened, right?
Not in immediate extraction mode, not in this is an emergency or crisis mode, or not acknowledging any of that. I mean, you're like, okay, something just pushed her away, but she may come back, and that wasn't even being acknowledged or dealt with. And of course, I guess he was in his own denial.
I think he had his own issues, right?
Yeah, right.
His own denial, right?
Yeah.
So I literally, again, by the grace of God, I pulled myself together and managed to get through the night, shaking, and I couldn't sleep, obviously.
Yeah.
And I managed to get out of the house the next morning. I did pack a bag, and I got all the things because I was not coming back. And I know what I should have done in hindsight, but I didn't. Anyway, well, I got in my car because I could drive then. In Delaware, you can drive, I think, when you're 14. And yeah. And well, you have to pass tests and stuff. And I drove her 50 miles. Now, I don't know how I did it, but I remember asking God if he could please help me, because I was so I was in such shock. I didn't know if I would make a mistake while I was driving.
Sure.
Right. Anyway, I got home.
You were traumatized. Oh, yeah. And you're behind the wheel, traumatized.
Yeah, it's just not optimal, right?
Not optimal at all. No. So yeah, you needed help. Yes.
Yeah. So, and all my, I had I had a brother who was in, my brother, he was in Colorado. So my siblings were no help because they weren't available, but my dad was, right. And anyway, so I managed to get home. I kind of collapsed on the wheel when I finally brought the car to a stop, and I walked in, and no one was there to greet me, which was interesting. I was like, wow. And so that was hurtful, right?
Sure. I mean, here
And
you survived this,
I
got
know. And
yourself
I was like,
there.
wow.
And where's the welcome? Where's
Yeah.
the, oh,
Yeah.
thank God you're safe. Where's the,
So
all
I,
that
I
you
walk,
needed?
I
Yeah.
walk in the room, and I walk in the house, I open the door, and Dad's upstairs in the bedroom, and he calls me up. So very interesting dynamic. It kind of speaks to how much denial was really in the soup, because I mean, if he had been able to actually get his head around what had happened, he that all the stuff would not have happened the way it did, right?
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so I went up, and he said, "Are you all right?" Now
Well, that's
he
good.
meant physically,
Hmm.
and I was like, "Yes, right." Mental was not his area, right? Spiritual is not his area particularly. Um, and I remember him getting on the phone. I don't remember a lot of this. I remember all I remember really is kind of what I'm telling you. I'm still having trouble accessing a lot of that because trauma, you lose memory.
Sure.
And the memories get a little twisted. So I have to be really careful about kind of which memory I bring in and what I say. And so he called my mom and he said, "What are you doing?" And she's not coming back. That's kind of all I remember. It was kind of an argument on the phone, and I left the room and I went upstairs. I lived on the third floor in this little thing. And it was kind of up to me to heal myself from that. I didn't have any, that just wasn't, it just wasn't available in my
Sure.
culture at the time. And my
Yeah.
family wasn't capable, right?
Yeah.
They kind of swept the whole thing under the rug. Nobody mentioned a thing. So it was like, after a while, I kind of denied that it ever happened. I was like, I wondered, did this even happen? My mom never owned up to it or anything. So that's stage one, is the setup. Stage two was when I got home, and I was like, now how am I going to cope, right? And and it goes all the way through when I doubted myself and wondered whether I imagined the whole thing. My body totally held on to all that, and
Absolutely.
and it,
Absolutely.
and it was and it was just a year before that I'd hurt my back.
Mhm.
So that physical accident, and then this major thing, and then I'd had some stuff in my childhood that was I did never resolve. So it was kind of a lot. And then stage three is when the survival instincts emerge. And I lived by my wits for a long time. There were no consequences to the betrayal that happened. That's an important part of healing, is like what's happening with the consequences. And I was afraid to say anything more about it because I felt like I might be pushed out of the family even more, made more of an outcast kind of thing. Um, so here's the thing. I That's really important around betrayal. Debbie has a book that she wrote before this called Trust Again. My trust issues really got that button really got pushed, because I was
Yeah.
like, if I can't trust my own mother, who can I trust, right?
Boy, can I relate.
And my dad to really have my back. I mean, he provided a safe place for me to come home so that I wouldn't get hurt physically, but there was that was it. I mean, and I'm grateful for that. And he did everything that he could. I'm just saying I had to live on my own invention.
Yes.
there was
Yes,
no
I know.
There
Yes.
was no
Yes.
support, right? Are you
Yeah.
are you familiar with having a trauma and having to get by on your wits?
Yes. I grew up with knights at knife point and gun point and that type of thing as a child. And people around me in complete denial. It's like, no, he's a good old boy. He wouldn't do that. He doesn't mean anything by it. And if you went to the police and turned him in and they put him in jail, well, why would you do that to him? He can't stand that. They put him in jail and it makes him crazy. No, he's crazy. That's why we put him in jail. And so absolutely. I mean, it was my grandmother literally hated me because I had her baby boy arrested, until he drew a knife on her, literally drew a knife on her. How dare I do that? And so yeah, so I'm relating to everything you're saying, everything, and my own flight fight, flight, and freeze mechanism, survival mode being turned on and not knowing how to turn it off. No doubt, in great part because so yeah, everything you're saying, I'm like, yes, I understand totally. So another reason why you and I are so, yeah, because it's, yeah, I understand exactly. And so I'm listening to you and I'm like, yeah, okay, it wasn't my mom, it was my dad. Knife, yeah, gun, yeah, shot the clock off the wall one night, things like that. I mean, yeah. So yeah, all of that, and I'm like, yes, I understand, very, yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's really quite remarkable that the two of us are having this conversation and we've turned into such gentle creatures.
yeah,
We really did break the curse and the violence. I didn't find out until about 2 years ago when my brother knows so much more about the family than I did. They told him everything, and by the time I came around 3 years later, it's like, they'd already said it. I was supposed to have it by osmosis.
there you go. Yeah.
So my mom saw her father try and murder her mother when she was just a baby in a high chair, and that's why they got divorced. So you see, this is so it like wow, it freaked me out because I was like, wow, so that's a pattern, from an ancestor clearing point of view. Okay,
Absolutely.
that's a pattern, right? So anyway, so that's stage 3. I wondered if I'd ever be able to trust anyone again.
Yeah.
And in my denial of my experience, I wondered, since I couldn't trust myself to admit my own experiences, if I would ever truly be able to trust myself. Now that's profound.
Yes, because and then as you say, you also start second guessing yourself. Did it really happen? So do you
Yeah,
trust yourself to believe your own memories,
that's
especially when
right.
everyone around you is like, well, you're blowing it out of proportion, or it really didn't happen, or whatever. Yeah. So yeah, trusting yourself. And then people are like, well, why don't you trust your own judgment? Why don't you trust your instinct? Why don't you trust your gut? Well, I don't even trust myself about what happened to me when I was young. How do I trust all of that? And yet everything in you knows it's real and true, and to trust, so there's this, there's this strong person in you that knows that you survived it and you got yourself through it. And then there's this other part of you that's like, but what if I'm wrong? So
That
I
can
mean,
happen.
yeah. So
That can
you're
happen.
this walking, talking dichotomy. You're this
Yeah.
paradox, and so you're constantly back and forth between this really strong person who, yes, I can do this, and this person who's like, yeah, whenever the day is done and you're by yourself, you're sitting there and you're like, okay, is all this real? You're still, yeah,
So this is why,
yeah,
this is one of the reasons why it's so important for us to speak out,
absolutely,
because this stuff gets hidden. People, there's
yes,
a lot of shame around it. I mean, like, my own mother, I like, wow, I can't admit to the world that she did that kind of stuff. So, um, not understanding all, I mean, the shame thing is something, and the guilt is like, well, what did I do to make her do that? Which I didn't do anything, but it doesn't matter. It's the stories that we tell ourselves. So there's a lot of shame around the victims of domestic violence and the perpetrators. And I just feel like we need to, and the enablers of any of it. So
yes,
victim is this triangle. And so I just think it's really important to talk about it, which is why I wanted to bring it in.
absolutely,
So,
absolutely,
it's stage 4 is the adjustment. Um, I went on with my life and made new friends. I got married and became a mom. Um, I felt safer in the world because I had my husband, who is an ex-husband now, but we were together for 40 years, which was, remarkable.
yes,
Um, I relaxed more. I felt more balance in the world. Remember, we get stuck in stage 3, which is the one
mhm,
I just described. But I was able to, because I had a lot of love around me, and I have love in me, and I was able to kind of, get in touch with that so that I could receive love and I could give love, and that worked pretty well. However, my relationship with my mom remained quite tenuous. I did my best to connect with her, especially because of my son at the time, but it wasn't easy. We had so much unresolved wounding that it made an authentic connection pretty much impossible. and we stayed estranged from each other until the end of her life, which was very sad. I mean, I connected in, but it wasn't. It was very superficial, you know. And then stage 5 is healing, rebirth, and a new worldview. And as you know, I entered a pain management program, and I was on. For those of you who don't know, I was on. I had this back injury when I was 14. It kind of then I had this thing when I was 15, and the whole thing kind of blew up into a lot of chronic pain for me in my low back, where I had this instability, and I had a bunch of surgery. And as a result of the surgery, I was on pain medication for 32 years and benzodiazepines, which is this thing to any anxiety medicine. Mm-hmm. I went into a pain management program to get off of those drugs and kind of get my stress response reset. Mm-hmm. And I ended up healing. I had the opportunity to not actually in treatment. It was later. I worked with this doctor in a small group a couple of years after I went out of his program. And I had a chance to actually bring this to the group. I didn't want to bring this to the group in treatment because everybody was detoxing. And why would you bring something like that to people that are already so vulnerable? You know, right? So
absolutely. I get it. Yes.
We were a few years later into recovery when I was able to talk about this in a group, and we worked with it. Yeah. So here's the thing. The healing around there, I had this aha moment. I realized that my mother was my teacher of compassion.
Yeah.
My mother was my teacher of how to be compassionate. Right? Now that's not just to other people, but to myself.
Yeah.
So that's this two-way thing. And I saw this frequency that I was going after. I'm looking for love. I'm looking for love. I'm looking for love. And I realized that the love was right here.
Yeah.
Right? That's stage 5. That's when you have a healing, a rebirth, and a new worldview. So that's how the stages work out. Later, let's see. I think I've been with Debbie since I think it's 2 or 3 years now. I think I went into her training 2 or 3 years ago, and I've been a coach on her platform for about 18 months. It started in June 2020. That the coaching part started then. So it's really cool to be now what I do on the platform, because I'm a yoga teacher. I'm a chronic pain management specialist, but I'm a yoga teacher too. Yes. And I have a specialty in trauma-informed yoga, and the issues get caught in the tissues. Remember I said that stuff.
I know that's, oh, Annette Bauckham just put, that's a very moving story. So, and yeah, Annette and I went to nursing school together like 30 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah.
Thank you for listening and for your comment. I appreciate
it. Yes, I wanted to go there, is the fact that all of this is relevant because trauma is trauma, and it gets stuck. The energy gets stuck in our tissues and in our body, in us, and manifests itself in different ways. You know, chronic pain, stress, anxiety, however, and it has to be dealt with until we work through it, move through it, get it out, whatever terminology you want to use. And so that's what we have to deal with. And so trauma is trauma is trauma. And so I kind of cringe when people want to say, well, it was emotional, or it was mental, or it was, well, trauma is trauma is trauma. And
the body
doesn't know the difference. The body responds, yes.
A broken bone and a broken heart.
A broken bone, a broken heart. Yes. I'm scared to death as a child. Traumatized because there's a mass destruction event, whatever. Trauma is trauma is trauma. And we all have different set points for what traumatizes us as well. So whereas you and I definitely have something that somebody could listen to us and say, wow, that's trauma. Someone else, something less, what seems lesser, can still traumatize them. So we can't be judgmental about what somebody says traumatized them. If they were traumatized by it, they were traumatized by it. It's subjective, not objective. There's no way to quantify what traumatizes someone. If it traumatized them, it traumatized them. It's like pain. Pain is pain. If somebody says they feel pain, they feel pain. It's not it's not for us to say, well, no, that couldn't be hurting you because it wouldn't hurt me. Well, it doesn't matter if it would hurt you or not, so trauma is trauma is trauma, and each person's trauma is their own. And so I'm very glad that you're bringing this up and we're talking about it as just trauma, because that's what it is. It's trauma.
So it all sends the same signal to the brain. It hurts.
Yes.
And
yes.
I'll give you another example of how trauma can show up. By the way, I had quite the nightmare last night.
Oh no.
And I woke up and I felt it in my body. I was like, oh my God. And I have a yoga practice I do in the morning. And I was grateful that I had it because I knew how to move that energy, right? So it wasn't
move that energy out. Yes.
So even something that's an imagine and something that we're imagining happening can still show up as trauma in the body. It's not so much the event, it's the meaning that we make of the event.
Yes.
And what we're doing with the energy. So it's really important. So what I do on the platform on the PTB Institute, what I do there is I do a trauma-informed yoga class every week. And I bring in practices that help you gently move the stuff that's stuck in the tissues, gently move it out. That's what I do. So it's kind of cool. So I do one online that anybody can come to on Thursday nights, and I do that one on Friday morning.
I love your Thursday evening one too. I try to catch the newsletter and try to repost it so people know about it. And
thank you.
Yeah. If you think about fibromyalgia and how it manifests in the tissues and just all over the body randomly, et cetera, I have no doubt that is related to exactly what you were just describing, how these energies, well, I'm sure of it, get stuck in our tissues, and I have no doubt that so much of what I've dealt with my whole life is this, but I didn't know that, I didn't know. So I was looking at everything that I knew to look at to take care of it. And it wasn't until I started releasing these things or dealing with these things, and I thought I had dealt with them, but the way we were doing it was not effective. And so the type of things you're talking about now, we now know more effective ways to deal with this. And so it doesn't make anybody at fault. It doesn't make past practitioners and past modalities at fault. We just didn't know. And now that we have the awareness of better ways to do it, or old ways that were lost, or however we want to look at it, thank goodness. Thank goodness. And that's why we do this and bring it to people. So I'm so glad you do what you do. So yeah, go ahead.
No, it's great. I feel like we see so many people in the Institute on the platform that are stuck in stage 3, where I've got my survival instincts on, and that's where I'm staying.
Yes.
Because they don't know how to move forward, or they don't have the tools, or
right. I was stuck there for years. I was stuck there for years because, well, and part of it is it takes so much of your energy to be in survival mode that where do you find the energy to find out how to get out of survival mode? It's like a vicious cycle. And you're trying to live, you're trying to do all those things, you're trying to have a life. And so that takes energy. And so it's like, how do you do all of this? And so it's getting to a point in your life that you can put all that together, even it's a challenge. And so it's that's why more education like this and showing people that stopping and taking the break and taking the time to go within and taking care of yourself is how you break that, and how it's so, yeah, because you're so busy, there's so much energy in being in that mode to begin with, just dealing with being in that mode, and then dealing with life. You're trying to work, you're trying to take care of the kids, you're trying to do all the things, and that just keeps self-perpetuating that mode that you're in. And so you have to stop. You have to, take a stop and say, okay, no, I'm not doing this anymore. I have to do this. It's like breaking the circuit. You have to break the circuit to fix the problem, and it's, I know it was many times I would get glimpses of what the answers were. I would get glimpses, but I was so caught up in in all the other, that there was no way to follow through with them. And it wasn't, yeah, so I relate to that. You use the word frequency a lot of times, so I'd like for you to explain to people why we're using the word frequency, because not everyone relates that term. Not, I just use the word circuit, breaking the circuit. You use the word frequency, so maybe we need to explain the
Sure.
terminology.
Love the question. Yeah, I'm going to answer that in just a second. I just want to add one
Sure.
thing.
Yes, go ahead.
We, from my experience, and I've got a lot of it now,
Yes.
we need to do this healing. We do the healing ourselves, but we have to do it in community with others
Yes.
so that we have some mirroring and some validation and reflection and understanding, and we're held. And it's very important. So Debbie's platform is just this blessing, right? It's kind of like I said, she's like the Brene Brown of betrayal, and it's not 12-step, but it's got these. We got a couple of recovery. I'm not the only. There's two. I think there's three recovery coaches in there. We all do something different, right? Mm-hmm. I do the chronic pain. Somebody else does sex addiction, and there's another aspect. There might be codependency or something like that. I touch on that from time to time too. But so three different kind of recovery coaches in there, but that we have all kinds of other people, and every coach is a little bit different. So everybody offers a nice kind of bouquet, a buffet of different things you can do.
Right.
So a beautiful healing and community, really important. Frequency. So everything is a vibration. If we just kind of go back to basic physics, every movement is a vibration, movement in the universe. And every waveform has a frequency. So that's kind of what we're referring to. I chant a chanted prayer every morning. It's called Meditation for the Soul, and it's 31 minutes in Gurmukhi. It's a high vibration, high frequency. Just puts me right in there because of the way it's structured, and it just boom, I'm right. That's where I start my day every day.
Yes.
So I do my yoga, but I start with the meditation with the soul. So it's just an example of music can be high frequency.
Yes.
People can now, when we talk about high frequency, we can also, when I'm talking about it in terms of music, this is a chanted prayer, and we call it in that work, we call it on the nod, on the sound current.
Yes.
High frequency. Now, it's not just Gurmukhi. Now, Gurmukhi is the newest language, and it's the language that the Sikhs use in their sacred texts. It's only sung or it's not spoken. It's only sung or chanted. It's not a spoken language. It's not conversational. It's only spoken like through their texts and stuff. So it's this, they call it on the nod or in the sound current. Now, here's the thing. It's not just Gurmukhi that's in the sound, on the sound current or in the nod. People and how they speak.
Yes.
And I'll give you a couple of examples. Oprah speaks on the nod. She speaks on the sound current. Brene Brown speaks on the sound current. Obama spoke on the, I don't like being political, but he did. He spoke on this. He had this kind of way. So did Michelle Obama. They have that frequency that they, and so that's an example of a frequency. Another example of a frequency is the frequency of addiction. Wanting. That's a frequency, right? Now my thing was like, I was searching, looking. It's very much like addiction.
Very much the same, very close to the same.
It's codependency because I'm looking somewhere else besides in here for something to heal me, or something that's not, that I want to use it to fill something inside of me that's empty.
Yes.
Now, that's an illusion that there's anything inside of me that's empty because I'm already whole. But the mind and the ego, go bonkers, and we tell ourselves these stories. So the frequency of I want want I'm looking for love. I'm looking for love in all the wrong places. It's an energy that you'll notice these patterns in your own life. Some people, one that's kind of common with women, more so with women than men, is worry energy, the
Yes.
frequency of worry. It's the same thing. Gosh, I hope I explained that. Anybody that's listening, could you comment and let me know if you understood what I just said?
Um, not getting any comments yet. I'll keep looking though. But
Okay.
yeah, but the frequency of worry, absolutely. I know exactly what you're talking
Yeah.
about, and it attaches to us as well.
It's an energy.
Yeah, it's an
It's an
energy.
energy, and we get in the pattern. And we get
I
used.
did. Annette said I did. She understood it.
Okay, thank you, Annette. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's a pattern. We use it again and again, and we use it because it worked. The first time it worked, same thing shows up. We start using it again, and we just keep using it. And after a while, it's unhealthy,
Yes.
right? I was just trying to get into a relationship with my mother. I didn't realize that it wasn't so much about my mother as it was about love
Yeah.
until I was older, right? And that's okay. I'm just saying it kind of turned in on itself, and I'm like, I'm still looking, and I'm not getting what I'm looking for. Well, it's because it's right here,
Yes.
right? It's a major thing when we're in recovery. It's a major thing that we look at codependency, anything that we're doing that's having us, anything that's an unhealthy behavior that's having us look outside of ourselves for the answer. That's an addictive behavior, right?
I think that's the reason why I started teaching people to not expect from others, but to find within ourselves. And then when we are talking about relationship, to tell others, this is how I show up. So this is behaviors or actions, whatever you can expect from me. This is how I show up. Not going into it from, oh, this is my list of what I expect from you, but this is how I show up. And then they say, okay, this is how I show up. And if those things work, great. But it's how do I show up? Who am I? How have I filled me? What fills me? What makes me? And that person knowing what makes them, because we have to fill ourselves up. That's self-love. So many people think self-love is they have different ideas of it. But self-love is, what have you filled yourself with? What are you? What was there to begin with? Not necessarily what you filled yourself with. What did you discover there when you went in and discovered yourself? And so when you show up in the world, how you have to know what you're showing up as. You have to know yourself, and so you're not expecting from others, because when we show up expecting from others, that's what we're doing. We're looking for them to fill us. Well, no, this is who I am. I know who I am. I don't need anything to fill me. I'm showing up and telling you, if you're around me, this is what you can expect from me. This is me when I show up. And so I want to know how others are going to show up. I don't want to give them a list of what I expect from them. I just want to know what I'm going to be around, that, and we know that because that's what we attract in. But that's, so many people, when they meet you, they're like, okay, this is my list of expectations. And if you don't check these boxes, then, I need to change you, or, and so I tell people, no, that's not it at all. We don't go into relationships or friendships or anything with expectations. We show up as who we are. They show up as who they are. So I think that's where I get that teaching from.
Yeah, an expectation is a resentment about to happen.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So my happiness and contentment should not depend on other people's opinions of me.
Absolutely.
That's where we're shooting for.
We are.
Right?
You're
That's
right.
kind of where we're going for in the self-love department. That's why we keep turning within, because we're so used to looking without. Now, having said that, I think it's also really important to understand the value of community and doing healing work.
Absolutely.
Because it's very helpful. You and I, right now, in this conversation, are doing healing work for each other because we're mirroring and reflecting back. And you totally understand what I've been through, and I understand what you've been through. And just that understanding and the again, the frequency that we're matching frequencies there, and when
Yes.
that happens, we at that level we
Right.
heal. So it's not like yes, I'm validating your experience, and you're validating mine, but it's not like a codependent relationship. It's not like,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yes.
So there's a
Right.
distinction.
Right. And that's another thing that I tell people too, is that we're not being real with ourselves if we think that we are not in relationship. But we're always going to be in relationship. And so the thing is to be in relationship where you're in vibrational frequency with one another, like you and I are talking now, because then it isn't codependent. We are meeting each other in our authenticity, where we are who we really are, in our wholeness, in our completeness. We are at vibrational frequency. The relationship works. It is the right relationship, but it is relationship. And that's the relationships we need to be in. Those are the ones that we should be in. And we're drawn to those. Those come together, like our relationship comes together so easily and so naturally. And so it just flows. And we have no problem putting shows together and having conversations. It flows because our frequencies match, because and that is what we should look for in relationships. And we shouldn't wall ourselves up and say, I'm not going to be in relationship. That's not it. We're kidding ourselves if we say that. We need relationship. That's what we need. We're here to be in relationship and to serve one another. We're not here to be without relationship, but it's when we're in relationships where we're expecting and we're doing it to replace something within ourselves that we think's not there, when we're not in the right frequency of relationship. That's the issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're well said, and I just wanted to say, you're not trying to change me,
Right.
or fix me, and I'm not trying to change or fix you. We accept each other where we each of us are in the moment,
Exactly.
and there's no trying to. It's just and that's the juice.
Yeah.
That's why our frequencies match, because there's no trying to fix, or you should be doing that, or judgment, or any of that stuff. There's just
Right.
two people having a conversation about stuff, and sharing authentically. That's
Yeah.
the
Exactly.
frequency we're at. That's why they match. Yeah.
Right. Right. And I would go one step further and say we're also people who, if I see something a little differently than you do, we're both people who hold space for that to be okay. And it's like, I don't have to change. I don't put energy into changing your mind. You don't put energy into changing mine. We leave that space for, okay, there's something that we don't see the same, but that doesn't mean anything. That's okay. On to the next thing.
It just is. Yeah.
It just is.
Yeah.
It just is. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's those are the rewards that you get when you check in, and you're coming from here.
Yes.
Other than now, I'm not going to say I don't. I'm going to say this. I put myself in front of teachers that are farther down down the path than I am.
Sure.
And I get humbled by them.
Sure. Yeah.
Acknowledged by them, and encouraged by them. Right. But as my friend, one of my teachers said to me, he knew I was going into a very big teaching last October, and he said, I loved it. He texted me. He said, pedestalize the teachings, not the teacher.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So put the teachings up on the pedestal, not the teachers, right at your level. Right. And I was like, yeah, that's a good one.
I like that. I like that. Yeah.
So really important.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, and that's how I feel though when I'm in your presence. I'm like, okay, I'm humbled. I'm learning. But I get that phrase too. So yes. Okay. So we have like 10 minutes left or so. I see Annette's with us. Annette, do you have any questions? And we have somebody else with us too who's not put anything in the chat. But if anyone has any questions, please do ask them. And in the meantime, okay. It's Ina. I think maybe you know Ina. Maybe is that someone you know? Hi, good to have you.
No, Anita.
Ina. Okay, Ina. INNA. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have
How do you
some.
separate the teacher from the teachings?
Oh, that's a great question. I love
It
that.
is. Yeah. Good
Yeah.
one. Thank
So,
you,
yeah,
Ina.
I've had a lot of practice around that one lately. A
There we
lot of
go.
practice around
Yes.
that one.
Yes. She said
Um,
yes.
I I taught Kundalini yoga. I take so I'm a teacher, a Kundalini yoga teacher, as taught by Yogi Bhajan, and I also learned Kundalini yoga classic Himalayan style. So I've got these two lineages that I've worked with,
Uh-huh.
and Yogi Bhajan has fallen from grace. As
Oh.
a teacher, he's fallen from big time. He had turned it kind of. There was an expose about 18 months ago, right when COVID hit. It's about when COVID hit. That he was he abused women sexually and other things, and
Wow.
and yeah, and here we were,
Wow.
found
Yeah.
this, and I'm like, oh man, and I won't get into my own stuff around that other than to say this because I wasn't there. I never knew Yogi Bhajan personally, so I never saw him misbehave or it's his karma. He did that, and the fallout from that is those women, those people, whoever, some of the men experienced it too. um that's all their stuff that they have to deal with, and
Sure. It's
however,
yes.
when I teach Kundalini yoga now, as taught by Yogi Bhajan, I'm very careful um to bring the teachings, and there's a lot of pain still in the Kundalini yoga as taught by Yogi Bhajan community. The three
Oh, I
a lot
see.
of pain still, a lot of pain, and a lot of pain, and there's a lot of healing going on. I feel like whatever he was up to, that was ancestral. That's a long history of this abuse of women by men, and men to other men. It's in the it's in the
Sure.
lineage. It's an
Sure.
ancestral thing. So
Sure.
that's kind of where I come from. But the teachings I found, I had to go through this journey myself. Is this even of any value? All the stuff I learned from this guy, and it was, I had to separate right on the spot the teacher from the teachings. But I was doing that anyway because I'm such a cynic. I
No.
I have some
No.
I have science training, and didn't I say something about trust issues?
Yeah. Yeah. No, not us. We don't analyze everything and say, what about that? Now, let me see. No,
Well,
we don't do that.
so I was already not, buying into the Yogi
Eh,
Bhajan.
sure.
Apparently he was a very powerful man that people kind of, people kind of got in awe. I never had any experience like that.
No, yeah, I'm with
So,
you.
and I still would have been cynical because I do have these trust issues, and I'm like, you're going to have to prove yourself to me.
There you go.
So
There you
I
go.
just, I just, and I would always be, I'm always like, if you said two words in this direction, I go, I challenge you on that. It's just the way I am. So I already had kind of separated the teacher from the teachings, but when this went down, I had to go even deeper, and I had to be I'm very, very, very careful about now how I teach.
Well, I think it comes down to what we have to do in all things, that just because someone's behavior, whether it's truly deviant or not, whatever kind of behavior, just because it doesn't line up with what we think is correct behavior, doesn't mean that their teachings, their line of work, what they do, their skill base, whatever, is incorrect. And
Well,
so,
yeah.
and in this case, of course, it was behavior that's not acceptable. But
So this is where the issue is in
right,
the community, as
right,
far as I can tell, because I'm kind of in the community,
sure,
watching it go through all this
sure,
trauma, resolving the trauma around it. Some people feel like the teachings are soiled by his behavior. I felt like the teachings are so pure, it doesn't matter what anybody does. The teachings live on their own.
yeah,
So
the teachings are independent.
I
Yes,
have a different way that I see things, and I
sure,
don't. Again, you mentioned this before. I don't. I'm not saying they're wrong or I'm right. I'm just saying it's how I see it. Did that
absolutely.
make sense to you? Did that distinguish teaching from teachings for you?
Yes, she says it's just healthy critical thinking, and yes, thank you so much.
Okay. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, and I believe that. Yes, I think for me personally, I'm very able to compartmentalize it and say, okay, this is the information they have and they were able to bring, and then this is the person and their actions, and the two are not necessarily, that one doesn't have to negate the other. If the actions don't suit me, that doesn't mean that their information, their teaching, etc.,
That's right.
is vilified, negated,
Yeah.
wrong, any of those things. And I can do that. Someone else may not be able to, and that's okay. And they may get to a point, maybe they're raw because it is emotionally touching them, and so they may come to a point where they do, or they may never. It may be philosophical, and they may never get there, and that's okay too. They don't have to see it the way I do, and I'm good with that. But for me, I'm very able to do that, and I'm, that's just me. So yeah.
I dove even more deeply into the teachings. It was
Right.
cool.
Yeah.
I got really curious about, well, where did these all come from? And it turns out a lot of them came right out of the Himalayan tradition, because I later took a training in that. I'm like, oh, this is like Yogi Bhajan, but something different. And I'm like, but they're really similar. I'm like,
right.
Oh, okay, I'm beginning to understand, right? Yogi Bhajan did something really quite amazing with Kundalini Yoga. With he took the teachings, and he brought in the Sikh holy text and scripture, and he brought in mantra from those texts, and they're very powerful. And it was a real innovation into the practice. It's different. There were other things he did, but I feel that was his most beneficial. He put Kriyas together really in an interesting way, and the rules are a little different when you do Yogi Bhajan style versus a Himalayan style, when you like put a class together and stuff like that. But I really went into a deeper dive on the teachings once all this happened. I got real curious. Yeah, I got real curious.
That kind of gets into how I feel we come about all of our knowledge and all the things I do. I think we're always building upon the collective consciousness, the things that are there. I think each person brings their own unique thing to it, and we're always building upon it. So we can always go back and find, if indeed like a situation like this happens, we can always go back and see that the work isn't all uniquely theirs anyway. They had something that they added to it uniquely, but that's part of being the unique aspect of ourselves that we bring to collective knowledge. And so that's how we're always expanding consciousness. His uniqueness expanded knowledge base, consciousness about something, but that doesn't soil all of that was already there, so
the journey for me was to not take his betrayal personally.
Sure.
Because I did at first. I was like, how dare you do this to the teachings, and like, how dare you do this to people? And I realized, because of my ancestor clearing work, I was like, girl, that's his karma.
That's him.
That's not got nothing to do with me. Right.
No.
But it does require that I be sensitive to others that did get smashed in that, and so I adjust accordingly. But it's not my karma. It's his and unfortunately theirs.
Right. And that is a journey for us all to get to, is that things that other people do like that, they're not about us. It's about him and where he came from and what was going on with him, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yes, it may affect us, and we do have.
Well, it affected a lot of people. They got hurt, and then is their healing, and as a community, we can to support their healing. That's kind of the way I do that. Yeah, as I said, we need to heal in community.
Absolutely, we do. Right. You're absolutely right.
Not in a codependent way, but in a supportive way.
Yeah, and there is a difference, which I think we covered well earlier. So, and that's really important that people understand that we're not. There is such a difference, and that there is nothing wrong with interdependence and community. That is not codependence. The two things are so different, and that we do need community and interdependence. We need that. We need each other. We need each other. We need relationship. It's the type. It's healthy. It's understand. Yeah, it's healthy. Right. So we have like,
Thanks so much.
yeah, we're like toward the end. So I put the links up for the book that you sent me, so it's in the description. And so, and of course, you'll be back next month, and we have a little Halloween surprise coming up, and Elizabeth's going to contribute to that. And so, what would you like to add before we go, Elizabeth? So I want to thank those who were here with us live today. I do want to thank you. Thank those of you who did that. So, what would you like to add before we go?
Well, I'd like to thank you very much, and I'd like to remind everybody you are your greatest healer.
Yes, absolutely.
Greatest healer lives inside of you. Yep.
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't have said it better. So on that,
Thanks so much.
Thank you. As long as you're breathing, you all keep living in great big capital letters. And thank you for joining us today. Bye, you all.